Hello, this is Kevin with Bangor Inc., and today we're going to be continuing on our BidMetrics Release 3.7 highlights. In the first session, we had just an overview that showed you the new Insight feature where the system could go through and help come up with prior projects that were similar and try to help aid in getting that number where you might even know a range of where that number should be before bids even start flying in. With that being said, in this session, we're going to take a look at the detail of what some of the changes were that were added that supports that and how some of that works and so forth. One of the main things that has changed is there's a new section in BidMetrics now called Libraries. As we go forward with this being the cloud estimating product of the future, this libraries is going to kind of be the replacement word that Sage is going to use for database. So you can kind of think about this libraries as kind of the same as the similar concepts as the database. So it's going to basically be where a lot of our different information is going to be stored as we pull that information to build other estimates and projects and so on and so forth. So with that being said, these are basically the main things that are now organized. So these aren't necessarily new features, but they've been centralized into a centralized location because all these have to do with kind of your site and getting it consistent with one project versus another and things of that nature. So I'm going to start at the top with attributes. Attributes are extremely critical because this is how the system knows. When I did that overview report, I was able to go through and say, based on marketing segment, what type of project this was. So I could say that this is a corporate building or this is a church or a school or something like that. And that's one of the leading things that the system is going to use to try to figure out what projects are similar to this project. So any of these project attributes are going to be critical if there's things that you can leverage to help figure out what are, instead of 1,000 different estimates, what are really the top, and it don't really matter, 10 estimates, 20 estimates that are very similar with this. So I could see this being all sorts of things like market segments, maybe the type of building or things of that nature, how many floors, how much square footage of building areas and things like that. So just a lot of things that potentially we can use for, there again, leveraging which projects are similar in that fashion. So these are just some of them that we've got set up right now. So I've got market segment regions and things like that. And there's other videos that kind of show how to set these up. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but this is where we could go through to just hit add and new ones. And some of these are basically list boxes. So, I make sure that the estimators are spelling things consistently, that they are picking things off a drop-down list instead, or some of them might be check boxes that is this included or not included, that type of thing. Some things could be dates and so forth, and some of it could just be like text fields and so forth also. So those are just some of the different types of attributes, though you could create, many that I've got started here. Same concept on subs. So subcontractor attributes, I'm not going to spend too much time here because most of this isn't necessarily used for the Insight function that I used earlier, but that's where it is a library function now, so it's kind of in the same organization. Cost categories. So cost categories are going to be critical because this is how, when we start getting into more of building estimates in the future, what are the different categories that I want? For those that use like Sage Estimating on-premise right now, we've always had 5 categories: labor, material, equipment, sub, and other. What if I could create my own? So here's where I went ahead and I hit like add a cost category, and I had an equipment category, and now I have equipment owned. So maybe I could have equipment owned, equipment rented, materials that need POs, materials that I plan on coming out of inventory, things like that you can now, with this version going forward, there's a lot more categories that I could potentially have to break down cost in more detail as we start building this thing into a true estimating product and adding the estimating functionality to what we've got today. Work breakdown structures. This is going to be very critical there again, because this is one of the ways that when I was doing the insights and I was looking at HVAC in that example, this is how I knew what other subs had bid that in the past and so forth, is I need to start really thinking about consistency, consistent codes, whether there are accounting cost codes, whether there are another set of codes or something of that nature, because that's how from one project to another, this is going to be critical for how the system knows what's the scope that dollar amount entails. So as I look at this, I've got a couple critical ones out there. when I build my estimates, I'm using this CSI division, and I'm also using this one called bid package. So this is bid package is really critical. So that's how it's known. When I was looking at that HVAC in that overview example, I was able to click on that sub, hit that particular phase within the bid metrics, and that's how it knew what other projects matched it and what dollar amounts to compare with. Is really some common code to do that. Now, work breakdown structure otherwise is really the exact same concept for those of you that have used estimating through the years. Exact same concept. So WBS codes are just other ways of sorting, filtering, grouping data in a spreadsheet type of thing. So that way I might have master format, I might have for my CSI formats and so forth, I might have different levels for unit format and so forth. I might have my cost codes in here. So a lot of different ways that somebody might take data and sort it. So that's a critical piece of our library going forward. Cost indexes. When I created that project overview, you saw that when I was comparing bids, it basically showed what the people's bids were. But my estimate was like, I don't remember the exact time, but one was a year or a couple years old and things like that. So each one of those estimates, when I was looking at them, I could see exactly what they had bid. And I could also see what my cost index was against it. So it basically, I think one of the samples showed that it was a 3.4 increase or something percent increase and so forth for what they had bid versus making it more relevant with today's time. So that's basically where these CPI tables come into factor, is that way I could build whatever my cost factors I want to have going forward. Now, this one here is one that's built into the system already. I could also hit add, and I could actually create any of my own. So I could start with a particular CPI, I could start with a custom and things like that. When I create these, I could also do things that might be regional and so forth. So if I just go off and create another one here, whoops, gotta give it a name though. So now I've got this new one. It's basically copied my regional one to get me started. So same type of concept I had before, but this way I've got my different regions in here. So that way I could get more honed in on the different regions and what those areas might be and what my default would be. And I could have a different equipment rate, other rate, things of that nature as I go through. This is exportable and so forth. So that way I can export this content out to get it updated and so forth. And when I was creating that, there was also a other attributes that I might associate with it and things of that nature. So those are some of the new things in the library to kind of A, help support that new insight function, and B, to get us into that next stage where detailed items, formulas, assemblies, and things like that will be starting to be added in to kind of morph this database that we're used to today into the libraries of the project in the next, as we go forward. If I look at a quick thing in administration, I do want to take a little detour here and take a look at my users. So in my users and so forth, right now, all my users are admins at the moment. But if I wanted to go through there and let's say for some reason I want this user for Justine, if I just click on it, it will demote it one level down to a librarian. So somebody that is a librarian can get into the library and change databases and things like that, but they can't get into our subscriptions and our companies and change the reports or add and take away users and things like that, where an admin user could, a librarian cannot. Versus if I downgrade it again, it'll be just a normal user. That a normal user is somebody that can go in and create projects and work on projects and so forth, but they're not allowed to touch the database and make admin type of changes to the library. And if I go back the other way, I could say this person's a user at the moment, but maybe I want to advance them to be able to do database work. So now they're a librarian, and I'm going to keep her back to where she's at as an admin and so forth. So that's basically how you can control the levels of security. So in the past, we just had admins and users. Today, we've got the admin, librarians, and users and so forth to be able to control who's allowed to change the database as we go forward. If I go back and take a look at my projects, the other thing that makes the whole insights portion work is each estimate we basically said had all these details. So that's where we had our attributes for market segments and regions and all this different, whatever those attributes were that you may, have set up for yourself and so forth, or add them and type of thing. As I have all these different projects set up, this is where I can also go back through. And if you notice, these have a little certificate type of thing in the corner, or kind of like a star. This one doesn't. So that's basically what this means, is this is a published job. So what a published project basically is telling me is that's the project that's going to be enabled to be used for future estimate comparisons and things of that nature. So if I've got like, I don't know, maybe I've created 2 or 3 projects along the way, kind of haphazardly, here's our different versions. There's probably one of them that I really want. Yes, that one's our final version, or this is the one that we know has the best possible numbers as we're doing this analyzing. So that way I don't necessarily have to have every project in the mix, but I could very easily come in here and say, well, I'd kind of like to add this one to the mix. So as I, as I look at them, down here at the bottom is something called publish, where I can basically hit publish, and now it adds that same publish flag to it. Now, being published does do a couple things to the project. The biggest thing is it locks it down. So I can't come in here and start changing my attributes after the fact or things like that, because at this point that is a published product or a project. So that way I do not want it to change or be able to just accidentally be changed by the average users and things like that. So I can come in here and say unpublish it if I want to basically take it off the list of projects. So as we go through there, that's how the system knows if I've got 10 estimates out there for one project, but here's the final one. This is how I can really notate this is the one that's allowed to be used for that insight function that we were looking at in the overview. Those are the main things that had to be set up to make that whole insights functions work, of being able to find similar projects and things of that nature. Let's take a look. I want to go back through one other piece here. So I'm going to go back through and create a project here. Locations now can try to find the coordinates of the location and things like that. So locations are sometimes handy, especially when I'm doing regional ones. So it's something that's highly recommended to put in some sort of location. So I'm just going to throw in something there. So in our overview one, I'm just kind of go back through it again. So this is where when we're creating new projects, this is critical because this is how the project's going to know what are the other similar projects that I'm going to compare against this project. What regions, if I'm using a region condition or things of that nature, or whether or not it's got a parking structure criteria, all those types of things. So that's where when I'm setting up this new project, it's critical that I put that information in there so that way it knows what are similar projects to be able to compare against. I'm not going to use a template in this case, whatever my permissions may be. So public's going to let anyone in my office work at it versus private would just be me and whoever I pick, which that's all the same stuff. So then this was another screen that was pretty much new. So we kind of looked at this at the overview. So this is where I could go through there and say, right now there's 11 similar projects. If I said show details, I can kind of go off and see the details associated with it. So I could tell right now market segment being corporate is the only condition I've got at the moment. If I said preview or customize list, that would show me all the different projects that were flagged as corporate market segment and basically where the regions were and whether they now had a structure and so forth. So a lot of my project information. So this is where I could come in here and say, well, this project here, that was something a little bit different or something of that nature. So I could come in here and say, I want to remove it from being similar. So that way it'll take it off the list. And maybe I've only got 10 projects that are similar now. Or I could go back and say, show me all the other projects. And maybe I want to go ahead and say, I'm looking for that project that was in some particular city or a particular name. So there's some tidbit of information that you can kind of keep track or might be similar, things like that. I could go through there and say, well, this project here is similar. So I could come back and highlight it and say, add to similar. And now as I take a look there, and I'm going to add this one back in too, just for the heck of it. So now if I go back and take a look at my, save this here. Oops. Go back to my list. You'll notice I've got the ABC one there, and I've also got, I don't remember which one it was, but if I look at there, This one here was that institutional one that I put in there, saying that it was similar. So that's where you can go through there and kind of pick which ones you think are similar to help get that insight tighter with similar type of projects. Now, this is also where I could add more conditions. So if I went through there and said, I want something based on a size that has to be within 10,000 square feet. So in this case here, that caused it to drop down because of some criteria. Or if I went ahead and, I don't know if I've got anything that close to it or not. Let's say if I said like 1,000. So that dropped it all the way down to 1 because I've only got apparently one other job that's that close. But that where I could say, it's got to be greater than 20,000. It's got to be less than 30,000 or, some sort of criterias to make sure I'm finding that best list of projects are similar. This is what needs to be checked. So that way, if I'm wanting to use that suggested insight and so forth, this is what's going to tell it to go ahead and put my subs in the metrics for me and so forth. This is where I could tell it whether I want to use the different CPIs indexing and so forth when it shows me the prior bids. And that's basically some of the new screens that you saw there. Okay, once that project is created, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter to open it up. It's going to ask me for, so this is where when we were talking about the library, we said these are critical. How am I going to compare this job with the other jobs and so forth? So this is where I was saying that CSI division and the bid package were what I was using in my current library. So that's the same codes I want to use on this one. Basically, right now, all this project is no money, no drill downs or anything like that associated with yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring in an estimate. So I'm going to say import estimate. I'm going to go off to next. This is going to go back to my other on-premise estimating and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my cloud estimate here, or my estimate that I've got the word cloud in. So that way, that's what I was using for this overview. And that's going to find that on-premise estimating and basically bring all the contents up to my cloud estimating environment here. So this estimate has some base bids, some alternates, and so forth. If I take a look, it had some different spec sections. And if I take a look at the same one we did for our overview and so forth for HVAC, you'll notice that because I told it to add my subs, it's automatically found any sub that is bid more than 3 times on this type of work. It's went ahead and added those to the headings for me. This project, here's the scope that was included of it. So this is where, if we click on it, this is where we see this bid insights. That is where it's going back to those, I don't remember what I had, 7 estimates or so, or 11, I think it was, different projects that were similar. When I'm looking at this, I have a legend that I can kind of control what I want to look at. So if I kept it real basic at the first part, I could just say, I just want to see the insight. So this is where it's trying to come up with this $42,000 is where it thinks the insight over those past jobs have been. Most of the time, I'm going to really want to see where this sub's bids were in the past. So I'm going to just tell it I want to see the bids at the moment. So now you'll kind of notice that this is how that insight line was kind of created, basically using the cost price index to forecast it based on some of these older jobs. But if I come back and actually take a look, I can tell these are basically where the price per square foot has been on each one of these projects. There was that BSI project, there was the Johnson corporate project and so forth. So it's basically showing what that particular price per square foot was on each one of those different projects that were comparable. If I click on this drop down, I can actually see the cost breakdown detail. So this is where I was saying earlier that this is what my budget was on that particular project. Here was what this sub's particular bid was. And this is what I ended up going with. In this case, there must have been someone came in cheaper or filled more of the components of what I needed for this project and so forth. So I could tell that that was not necessarily the one that won the bid. I could see the CPI index is going to add about 3% to that because of the age of that job. So I could basically see that in front of me. So that way I could tell there's the bid, there's what's going to be increased. So there's my index value that it's using as I'm going forward. Versus if I go back to maybe one of these older ones, you'll notice that that's 18% because that's quite a bit older of a job. So that can kind of vary as I go through. This is also where, as I look at this, I can tell this one's got a check mark in front of the awarded, and my bid and my awarded are the same. So I could tell on that particular job, this is the sub that I had used on it. So that way, as I'm kind of going through there, I can kind of see that. Now, as far as the bid price, I do think it's kind of easier to see sometimes if I said, show me the awarded and the bid. So sometimes this would kind of show me the other values as I'm kind of going through there and so forth. So just another way of kind of seeing the different values and where they're at. I think the bids are the main ones I want to see at the moment. And then you could also see your own budget. That I don't know that the budgets usually are as critical as probably what the people bid or who was really awarded for that job and so forth. So that's pretty much how the Insights is really functioning, is using some of those new things for the library as far as standardizing the bid packages and so forth, getting good attributes in there so that way when I'm starting the project, I can find similar projects to go back and show me which ones are similar, averages this content out and so forth, and give me some sort of forecast of what it thinks that number should be. So there again, as I'm sitting there punching numbers in there, if I said that they came in with maybe $50,000, I can kind of go back and tell that's about 17% higher than what I kind of thought. Doesn't mean it's necessarily a problem, just higher than maybe what I originally thought it should be. Or vice versa, if somebody came in at 37,000 or something of that nature, maybe then it's going to say, hey, you're 12% lower than what kind of the average in the past has been and so forth. So the main thing there is really just trying to get rid of the real high or real lows of, they're again, just trying to analyze some of these bids with where their past historic has been. That's a little bit of the detail of how the Bid Insights worked from our overview session and what the new ads for BidMetrics in the last release. Thanks for watching.